Hi everyone, welcome to Live Your Language, tips and inspiration for your bilingual life. I am Stephanie, a PhD student in second language acquisition and a mother to two children that I'm raising bilingually in my non-native language, French. Today I am really excited to share with you a really interesting article that I just came across which investigates how important a non-native speaking parent's language is to his or her children's language development. Of course, this is of particular interest to me because I am not a native speaker of French, and yet I'm trying to raise my children to be French speakers. So the really exciting thing about this article was it actually found that the native or non-native speaker status of the parent was not as important as the proficiency of the parent in that language. So that's really great news for us because whether or not you were born speaking a language or your parents spoke a language to you is really out of your control. Proficiency, on the other hand, is in your control, and that's something that we can work with. After reading this article, it really helped me recommit to ensuring that I'm doing everything I can to make sure that my level of French is as high as it can be. Given that, I really started thinking about what are some really quick, easy ways that I can increase my language proficiency every day, just to make sure that I'm always growing and that I'm keeping up the skills that I've worked so hard to get. So in this video, I'm going to share those strategies with you. And by the way, all of the information for this article is down in the show notes below, so I definitely encourage you to check it out if you are interested. My first tip for increasing your proficiency in your everyday life is to mentally translate things as you go on throughout your day. Now, a lot of people think that in order to increase your speaking proficiency, that you need to actually verbalize the words, as in your vocal cords need to move and words need to come out of your mouth, but that's actually not true. There is a lot of work that happens behind the scenes as we're forming and developing our thoughts into words in our non-native language. So actually, as you translate in your head, if you go throughout your day, for instance, and you kind of have a monologue and you challenge yourself to try and say that in your non-native language, there's actually a lot of benefit to doing that. So one benefit is that it reveals gaps in your vocabulary so that you can go back and address them later. The second thing that it does is it really helps with something called automatization, which is the process of moving things from explicit knowledge, the source of things that you learn in school, like in a grammar book or looking up in a dictionary, to the sort of knowledge that you can access really rapidly and that helps build fluency. The third thing that's really great about this is that it keeps you thinking in the target language throughout the day. There's a cost to switching back and forth to languages, and while there's a lot of research that talks about the benefits of this switch back and forth, in the moment where you're focusing on other things, it's really helpful to have those cognitive resources dedicated towards something else. The next tip that I have is deliberate practice. Deliberate practice focuses on the incremental improvement that comes with just focusing on one tiny little aspect that you want to improve. So I actually have a video discussing deliberate practice with pronunciation using storybooks or really any book that you read aloud, and I will link the video down below. Basically, what you want to do is you want to make sure that throughout your day, or if you're doing a certain task, you want to choose one specific goal that you have. So it might be making sure that you pronounce one word that you always mess up perfectly well. So making sure that when you're talking to your kids or you're talking to your coworkers or you're talking to whoever you're talking to in your second language, that you always do so with a goal in mind. The next tip that I have for increasing your language proficiency is close listening. So I actually talk about in a former video creating your language bubble, and one of the tips that I provide in that video is to make sure that whatever media that you're consuming are always in the target language. Often I'll have something kind of going in the background, but I won't be listening to it closely. With close listening, you're actually listening to every word that the newscaster says or every word in the podcast or whatever it is you're listening to, and making sure truly that you're actually understanding every single word. That will be really helpful in not only revealing gaps in vocabulary, but kind of training your brain to listen more quickly. So you might notice that a lot of these tips have a lot to do with increasing your vocabulary. The reason why I'm talking about this is because vocabulary is one of the biggest ways in which non-native speakers differ from native speakers. The next tip that I have for increasing your language proficiency is to look everything up. I know that in language class when you're in high school, you maybe were taught this tip of circumlocution, which is basically when you're missing a vocabulary word or the necessary grammar you need to finish a sentence, you can talk your way around that without actually making a mistake. This is a really great strategy if you're talking in a formal setting, but if you're just in your house or even if you're doing the mental translation like I talked about in the first tip, not only will it be extra salient for you because you have the context of using it in your everyday life, but at least with me, I've found that there are the same language gaps that I encounter over and over every day. If you're looking these words up, then next time you need them, you can actually use them, which will reinforce them for later uses. So the final tip that I have is for you to find your person. Now, what do I mean by that? Usually, native speakers are far too polite to point out our mistakes that we make in their native language. So everybody really needs that person. And if you have one of these people, you know exactly what I'm talking about, who you can always go to ask, how does a native speaker say this? Or how does a native speaker say that? And also a person with whom, when you speak, they will always correct your mistakes. Okay, those were 5 really simple tips that you can integrate into your everyday life to improve your language proficiency. Now, if you found these helpful, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any other videos where I'll be discussing more tips and tricks for bilingual parenting. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video.